I was thinking about that moment a lot through the race, seeing my dad at the finish line. So much so that I was telling the pacers, I was like, don't let him have his phone on him, because I know dad loves to record everything. I was like, don't, because I'm going to go straight to him. I was quite emotional thinking about it through the race. It's an emotional time, you're running through it. And I was like, I remember I was tearing up with I would say about 15 miles to go, just thinking about what it was going to be like to see my dad and give him that hug. And then I got to the finish line and everyone was so happy. I completely forgot about it. It's like just seeing everyone that's just supported you through the whole time. It was almost the opposite. It was the biggest high ever, seeing everyone. And I don't think you could ever I don't think I could ever have a high like that again, where you've just completed possibly what is the hardest thing, definitely the hardest thing you've ever done. And everyone that cares about you has stayed on and they're really happy and you're really happy. It was honestly one of the best moments ever.
Welcome to another episode of the Running Tales podcast, where we tell the extraordinary stories of everyday runners. My name's Craig Lewis, and the voice you just heard was that of Joe Thomas, talking about reaching the finish line of the 103-mile North Downs Way 100. Joe was running to raise money for MDS UK, a charity which works to support people with Myelodysplastic Syndrome, a rare form of blood cancer. Joe chose the charity after his father Pete was diagnosed with MDS last August. Despite only having had limited previous running experience and suffering plenty of injuries along the way, Joe last month finished the Farnham to Ashford race, which covers 11,000 feet of ascent and involves running through the night in 27 hours and 55 minutes. Along the way, he trained by taking part in a marathon and a 50-mile race, as well as learning how to handle his nutrition and plenty of other running tips. But I started our conversation by asking him why he had decided to do such a formidable race.
So I signed up for the North Downs Way 100-mile ultra marathon back in December, and the aim really was to raise awareness of and money for MDS UK. So MDS, I can never pronounce it, but it's a rare form of blood cancer that sadly, as you mentioned, my dad was diagnosed with last August. So coming out for about a year ago now. That was a big motivation for me signing up, I guess. It was a hard year for my family anyway. So I lost my two remaining grandparents, and then that was in January and April. And then off the back of that, dad got diagnosed. And I think the family was obviously suffering, and you sort of get to a point where you're like, okay, so what are we going to do about things? And whether you like it or not, when you end up having a disease like that in a family, you become part of a community. And we became part of the MDS UK community, and they were so helpful with my dad. And I thought, what's a way that we can contribute, and what statement can we make, not just to the community, but I think also one I wanted to make for my dad as well, to say, hey, let's do something big, like let's get interested in something, let's train for something. I got this crazy idea of signing up for the North Downs Way 100-mile ultra marathon. And I guess that was part of it. And then the other part is probably the same reason that all of us at some point end up doing these runs, right? Is there's that something something inside of you saying, hey, what if I did this? Could I do it? And I think it's about potential, and I think it's about putting yourself out of that comfort zone. Now, I spend a lot of my time sat behind a desk, Craig, and you don't get many podcast requests, about what do you do in the office. Let's put it that way. So there is that excitement that you get of putting yourself out in a completely different environment where you want to push yourself. So that was it, really. It was a sort of the marriage of those two ideas.
The big thing there seems to be just this idea to do something huge, do something different that's not an everyday thing, both because of what had happened to your dad and to kind of scratch that itch within yourself as well.
Yeah, I think, at the time I wasn't really running, which is sounds a bit crazy. So one of the other things, the only running I was really doing was one of my best friends had just had a kid at the start of 2022. And I'm sure he listens to this, and Sean, sorry, apologies, but he gained a lot of weight. So he's about 105 kilos. And I said, right, we're gonna start running. Let's get you back into shape. So we started off doing 5 minutes one Sunday, and that just built up every Sunday to him at the end of the year doing this 10K run, which we did on New Year's Eve. And I guess part of it was I was watching this, my best friend just totally transform himself into running, and he really didn't like running. Like he really didn't want to do it. And kind of like when you spend every week with a person like that, who's forcing themselves to do something they don't want to do something they don't want to do, it kind of scratches your mind and goes, well, what's my equivalent of that? Because I'm running within myself. So what's going to put me in a zone that says, bloody hell, this is going to be a challenge. And I think that was another part of it, is just thinking, okay, so what's my equivalent of running 10K on New Year's Eve? And apparently it was 100 miles.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a jump and quite a thing, because you might have thought, particularly as I believe the previous race you'd done was a 5K back in 2018 or something like that. You might have thought...
Yeah, I'd never really done any running events. Like I'd run longer distances,
right.
But I'd never done I just don't. I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy running, but it was more like means to an end. This is a good weight loss tool, but running, entering marathons and all that sort of stuff. It was like a one-day thing. Like maybe I'll do it, but it certainly never appealed. I'd just done a couple of 5Ks, as I said, that were the last ones in 2018. So yeah, it was that was part of it, right? It was just a big jump.
And the question I was going to ask was, I just wondered why 100? Why not a marathon? Why not even like a 50 miler or a 30 miler? That's a huge number. Just the roundness of it.
I think so. I think David Goggins is partly to blame for this, right? So people like him. I think I'd listened to his audiobook, and I'd listened to it a few times actually, and Cameron Haynes' audiobook, and both of their books sort of centered around this 100-mile landmark for them running. And one of the big things that's always appealed to me about challenges like this is it's not really a physical benefit, it's the mental benefit. And I don't really mean from a mental health perspective, I mean that
resilience.
It's resilience, right? It's like no one needs to run 100 miles, but what kind of person can you be mentally if you can not just endure 100 miles, but I'm big on, it's not enduring, it's not suffering, it's how you suffer, and framing yourself mentally to endure the right way, so that you want to keep coming back and not just seeing stuff as a negative experience. So that was just a massive challenge for me. And when I was reading those books, they kept talking about the 100 miles as this a state of enlightenment of we ran 100 miles, and I thought, I wonder what it'd be like then. So why not do it, and then I'll know for myself. And I think it's easy for me. It was easy for me to do because I was just sat at home thinking, well, it's only 100 miles. I haven't had the context of doing a 50, so I never knew how bad 100 would be. So I thought, why not give it a shot and see where we get to.
Yeah, I want to get on with onto later how you found that and whether you found that experience. But a little bit before that, I want to kind of go over the training from someone who'd done some longer runs, a few runs with your mate, 5Ks in the past. So then how did you suddenly train up to this? And also I think you had to go through a few challenges first as well to even qualify to do that 100 miler.
Yeah, so it turns out, Craig, that only an idiot like me would just sign up to a 100-mile ultra marathon. So once I signed up, I started reading the terms and conditions, which were I had to have completed a 50-mile ultra marathon just to qualify. And then so I signed up to that. And then again, it turned out I needed another qualifying race. So I needed to have done a marathon to do that. So I effectively had to run a marathon on February 12th and then 50 on May 20th, just to qualify for me for the 100 on August 5th. So yeah, it's but in a weird way, that kind of defined the training. What I did was probably one of the smartest things I did in what was a crazy decision was I got a personal trainer. So there's a guy, Ollie McCarthy in Tunbridge Wells, running focused trainer, really good. So he was able to be honest, just take out a lot of the guesswork of how do you, from a completely novice mindset of what kind of training do I need to be doing, and also just batting away all of these questions and taking away a lot of the noise that you read on how do you approach an ultra, and then you Google it and there's about 200 articles saying different things. It's great just to have one piece of advice I could rely on and save me all of that time. So really, my training was characterized by those 3 runs. So initially I was training for the marathon on February 12th. I did what every person I imagine who tries to train for 100 miles does, who's out of shape, which is run loads, ignore the pain. And then I got injured with a knee overuse injury within the first 5 weeks. Yeah, I mean, it was it was just one of those things. I was running and I was like, well, I'm the kind of guy that's going to run 100 miles, so I don't feel pain. And then I did, and then I didn't walk again for 3 or 4 weeks. Didn't learn my lesson, but I still showed up on February 12th. I hadn't run in about 3 weeks before that. I'd done 20 minutes on the Saturday, the day before, just to check my knee was holding up, and then basically ran a marathon straight off the bat, 6 days after a long ski weekend.
Right. So how did it go?
Well, I did under 4 hours, which I was very, very surprised by. So I just thought I was going to blow up. So I thought I'll do 10K, see how I am, 10K, see how I am, 10K, see how I am. And then before I knew it, I was crossing the line and I was back to sort of not walking again for a few days. And then I started getting cracking on with a 50 really. And that's where the training started ramping up. I started getting on trail. Didn't really learn my lesson because I thought it would be a good idea to run through a calf, like bit of calf pain for 30K, tore my calf about 5 weeks before the 50 and had some ankle ligament damage. Again, didn't run. I think I did one run, maybe. I had to get an x-ray on my foot to make sure like nothing in my ankle had been fractured. And then I think I did one sort of 25 minute run. And then that was about all I did for 4 weeks before the 50. Turned up on the 50 again, thought I'll just do 10K and ended up completing the thing. And that was 6 days before a long weekend in Lisbon. So I think it was like, I was starting to think maybe these long boozy weekends actually are great for running. I don't know, they're like a medicine for me. And that was it. And then that was more or less it in terms of training. It was just a lot of what you'd imagine, right? A lot of long runs, long, slow runs. I have issues with my knees, so I was trying to take as much off. I was trying to lose a little bit of weight without putting myself in too much of a stress deficit wise. And then also I was doing a lot of bike work as well, just to really take the strain off my knees. But other than that, well, yeah, it was just a lot of long hours out on the road.
And by that point, had you sort of found out whether you actually liked doing running or not? Or did you still hate it? Or you're like, no, I actually quite like this now?
It's a real mix. Like I did learn to love different parts of it, but not for the reasons I thought. Weirdly, it was the longer runs that I enjoyed. And I was really lucky on my longer runs because I had my friend who I was running with every week. He'd come out and do sort of like 8K, 9K. My girlfriend's fantastic. She's like that. She doesn't really run, but then she'd go and run a half marathon with me as part of my training. So I was so lucky to have company on those runs. So that was a really, really nice part of training. But then the other part was, these long runs. And I think that's where the mental side really came into it, is just being out by myself for hours and hours and hours on end. And sometimes you're just, like in my head, I was almost playing this mind game with myself where it's just, you're trying to stay ahead of some of the thoughts that are saying, this is starting to hurt. You must have had it where you're like, this is hurting, or my knee doesn't feel right, or I'm getting tired now. And constantly just trying to play this game of thinking of like, what's a better quality of question to ask myself on why I want to keep going. And I would have these moments, and sometimes it would be, you'd get that high, maybe 20 minutes into running, you think this is going great. Or sometimes it would just be a slog and it would take me 3.5 hours and I'd finally crack that code and be like, this is it. I'm here now and I want to stay in the game. And it was realizing that process of a long run it's not linear, like it's going to get worse and worse and worse, but it's realizing that this is going to come in waves, and it's about finding that mental gear. And that was the game I was playing, and that I loved, that I really enjoyed.
And did you also start to find a difference in the way you were training and the way you were running between the marathon and doing that 50 miler? And what I mean by that is kind of like, most people, not everybody, but most people will sort of try and run a marathon all the way through. But then an ultra becomes a different beast where suddenly walking is your friend and you can eat a meal as you go around and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was really weird because I started running stretches of trail, but I was running them initially like a marathon. So when I turned up to the 50 mile, I had not really done what typical like ultra marathoners would have done. So I was running this first 50 mile and I was like, we're off. And then people just started walking up hills. Yeah. And I was like, I'd obviously heard about this from like David Goggins' audio book and various other things. But I was like, oh yeah, this is how it works. So I started to realize, you walk, it's a lot of walking and then a lot of running. And that really did change quite a lot. And then that started to change, especially after the 50. When I started training for the 100, it was still a lot of running, but it was really trying to build in on some of those steeper hills, build in your hiking, build in your walking, because that's where you can hemorrhage time on those longer distances. Is that at least what I realized on the 50 is that if you walk at a normal pace, you can really lose a lot of time. But if you can keep the pressure on and keep walking and you're a good hiker, that's going to keep you in the game over the course of 50 miles, over the course of 100 miles. So that started to become a lot of how I thought about my training, especially between the 50 and the 100, was basically kicking it into a slow gear and just maintaining that consistency and getting the walking done. But yeah, it's a weird one. And to your point on the food, yeah, I mean, that's the best part, I think, is that you can it is like you can eat whatever you like while training for an ultra marathon. You basically go out for a few hours. I've got a big sweet tooth. I always have been, but I've in my sort of like older age, I'm not super old, but I've had to suppress it to avoid significant amount of weight gain. But it was a real pleasure just to indulge that and smash a packet of Tang Fastics on a Saturday morning when you're going for a long, slow run. So that's the best part.
Yeah, it's the only kind of sport where they actually start throwing things like jelly babies and flapjacks at you and go, this is good. This is what you should be eating.
Well, you hit one of the aid stations on the 50 or the 100. It's just full of sweets. It is brilliant. But I remember my personal trainer say, like, one of the last conversations we had before the 100, he said, this is as much an eating challenge as it is a running challenge. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, that is literally your fuel. You're going to burn thousands upon thousands and thousands and thousands of calories you need to be eating. I went in thinking, what if I'm not hungry anymore? But that kind of never went away. I just kept eating and eating. It's brilliant. I'm always thinking like, that was worth doing the 50 and the 100 just for the amount that you can eat.
Yeah, and the only danger is that like afterwards you keep on eating that much and you stop doing the running.
I had to throw away so many packs of sweets because I kept eating them. Like over the last couple of weeks, I've just had to throw them away.
So as you got closer and closer to the date of the 100 miler earlier this month, were you feeling really confident that you were going to do it? You'd done a 50 miler. Were you sort of feeling, I can do this, or was there a sort of element of, I don't know what's actually going to happen on the day?
So many emotions. So, I mean, one of them, I was a bit, this is a bit classic. Like I'm fairly sure I broke my toe like about 5 weeks before the run. I thought it was a good idea to try surfing lessons. And after about half an hour, I came out of the water, which is very cold. And everything started to swell up and I had a purple toe. I was limping around for a few days. So in the lead up, I was thinking, oh no, if I completely wrecked my toe and all those sort of doubt, that from about 5 weeks to go, I was like, doubt started to creep in. But as that started to get better, then I started to turn towards fundraising and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be good. And, we've raised now about £12,000, that's excluding gift aid for MDS UK. I think we were in the top 1% of fundraisers on Just Giving last month.
Fantastic.
So we've done an amazing fundraising effort. So grateful for all the people that have donated. And I think possibly just about everyone I've ever met personally and professionally knew I was doing this. So obviously that adds a layer of pressure that you're thinking, okay, well, I know I'm going to give this a shot, but what if I just twist an ankle after mile 1 and then I only make it like 2 miles? How embarrassing would that be? So you have all these thoughts, like anyone would, and you have no idea how your body's going to break down because you're going twice as far as you've ever gone, and it's just a big unknown. But then I think the overriding sense is that you don't get many opportunities to live a day, or rather a day and a bit, like you would with 100 miles. It's like if you get it right, you stay in the game. And for me, I was like, as long as I give everything I've got, I can live with that. You don't get many opportunities in life to live that day and know that day is coming and got it in the calendar. And then that's a day you're going to show up and put everything on the line. And that was really exciting. That was a day I was really looking forward to. And to be honest, one that I've missed. Now it's gone off the calendar. You're kind of thinking, what's next? Because you just don't, it's not often that things line up like that. and you've done all those things. So it was a real mix. And I was gonna say, and then trying to think how I felt on the day, but to be honest, I felt so full because I've been carb loading the 2 days before. I wasn't in a I wasn't in a good place.
There's that horrible feeling sometimes. I mean, I've never done a 100 miler or even a 50, but you know, I've done kind of 30, and you eat so much the night before, and you eat a lot in the morning. And you're like, actually, I've eaten too much. I can't even move, let alone try and run now.
I could not. I couldn't think of anything worse than on the Saturday than run. So my personal trainer, like Ollie, had me eating something like 830 grams of carbs on the Thursday and the Friday. So I think I did about 5,000 calories on the Thursday. Woke up Friday morning. And the race is on Saturday. Woke up on the Friday morning, and my body was like under attack from so much stress. So I was like, had a really bad headache.
Yeah.
Like my nose was streaming, my throat didn't feel great, and I was like, what have I done? And then still knowing I had 4,500 calories left to eat. Yeah, I think that was almost one of the toughest parts of the whole weekend. Just waking up and miserably eating cereal on Friday morning. That was tough. And then, but by the time you sort of, I have to say, it definitely pays off. I mean, a couple of hours into the race, you're feeling so good. You feel like you've got loads of energy, and just sets you up. Like I would always do it again. Just sets you up for the race.
Yeah, and I guess the biggest question of the whole thing was how did it go on the day, and I'm guessing because it's kind of impossible for there not to be. What were those dark moments like, and how did you get through them?
Yeah, so I guess the big one leading up to it was the weather. So I was away with my mum, my dad, and my girlfriend a few weeks before in Italy, and I did a very long run, and it was about 30. I was out for about 5 hours. It was about 34, 35 degrees, and I was cooked. I was just not used to the heat, and that set something off in my mind, thinking, "Oh my God, I could really suffer here in 100 if I'm not ready for this." So I was Googling heat training. I was in the sauna 3 times a week, like running with loads of clothes on. And then, of course, on the 100 miler, it's absolutely pissing it down.
You did it in Britain. What did you expect?
All the heat training's gone out the window. It's like I'm running in Storm Anthony, as it turns out. And it was like the first part, you're just like, what? Especially when you're in the early parts, because you're just thinking it's 167k or 100 miles to go, and it's raining and it's horrible, and you're thinking this is going to be a long day. So that was tough. I mean, in terms of those down moments, I think I did a lot of work going in. You know, I think a lot of the thing about 100 milers, like as you know, is more mental than it is physical. So at some points you're going to start breaking down physically, and the distance is going to become enormous. And I did a lot of thinking about what's going to come up for me mentally, and how am I going to handle that, and like what are my reasons going in, so that I know when I start to feel tired what I should be thinking about and how I dig in and things like that. And those moments do come. I think the hardest part is knowing that you have so far to go, especially at the start, is knowing you've got so far to go, and knowing that at any moment something could blow up. Like if your quads start hurting, you think, is this going to get me? Your ankle starts hurting, is this going to get me? But you've also done enough runs to know, well, I've been on a run and my ankle feels a bit weird, and then it goes away. And that causes a lot of stress, especially when you're running on trail and it's slippery and it's horrible. So I think those are some pretty tough moments. I think getting to halfway was amazing, but also very tough, because you think I've only done half, and then it gets into the night and things are starting to get bad. But in terms of like really low moments, I don't know. I think I was just lucky. I think I was really lucky, like, because I had always had support crew, aid stations, and like from 50 miles on, I had pacers, and I just picked all of my best friends to come and run with me. They'd never run on trail before. They had zero experience, but you don't need trail runners. You need people that know you, know you well enough in your tough moments, that are going to know when to be quiet, when to push you, how to pull something out of you that you don't know is there. And that's exactly what they did. So
yeah,
I was really lucky. And then I think, like I said, when I went in, I knew that things were going to be tough. I knew that I was going to go, this is a lot, I'm in a lot of pain right now. But I think I'd done enough on those long runs to know that this is only temporary. You just have to find a better quality of thought. And for me, I had so many going in. I had things like my dad to think about. I had all of the people supporting me to think about. And then I also had this crazy year where I spent 30-40% of it injured and thinking I have no right to be out here. I could have been injured I could have missed any one of those races, but I'm still out here. I've still got a chance. And as long as I can put one foot in front of the other, I can give this a go. And just imagine if you pulled it off.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a video on your LinkedIn of the finish, which is quite an emotional video. Your dad's obviously there, and it almost looks as if a few of those things you're talking about sort of start to come out as you hit that finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, I would say somewhere with about 17 miles. I was thinking about that moment a lot through the race, seeing my dad at the finish line. I was thinking about it a lot. So much so that I was telling the pacers, I was like, don't let him have his phone on him, because I know dad loves to record everything. I was like, don't, because I'm going to go straight to him. And I was quite emotional thinking about it through the race. It's an emotional time, you're running through it. And I was like, I remember I was tearing up with I would say about 15 miles to go, just thinking about what it was going to be like to see my dad and give him that hug. And then I got to the finish line and everyone was so happy. I completely forgot about it. It's like just seeing everyone that's just supported you through the whole time. It was almost the opposite. It was the biggest high ever, seeing everyone. And I don't think you could ever I don't think I could ever have a high like that again, where you've just completed possibly what is the hardest thing, definitely the hardest thing you've ever done. And everyone that cares about you has stayed on and they're really happy and you're really happy. It was honestly one of the best moments ever. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, oh, well, that's brilliant. I am sort of interested as well, because you hinted at it earlier, at what happens after a big race like that, and twofold really, because you spoke about what you were hoping to get out of it in terms of resilience and how that could be brought into the rest of your life, but also you obviously had that huge high. I've spoken to runners in the past who've done something amazing like that, and they tend or potentially can have a bit of a low afterwards because there's not that event to look forward to after. There's not that big goal anymore. Has that happened to you, or are you kind of feeling okay at the moment?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's nice to have a little bit more time back. No, I'm feeling really good. I think it was, everything that could have happened that I wanted to happen happened. It couldn't have gone any better. And I've come out relatively clean injury wise. I thought, oh God, maybe I won't be running again, and everything's a bit sore still, but I'm walking around okay. Things are good. It couldn't have gone any better. And I'm enjoying it. Yeah. Do I miss not having something to shoot for? Absolutely. I think anyone that does that kind of race is the person that doesn't stop afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's, what is the next thing, and how do you find that, and how do you break it down? And that's the question that is sort of colonizing my mind at the moment. And that's an exciting process too.
Do you think it'll be running related again?
I want to swim the channel.
Really? Oh, wow.
That's the one that's, if it's running, I think swimming the channel is going to take me about a couple of years to do, because I'm a terrible swimmer. Terrible. I'm a terrible swimmer. My girlfriend swims faster than me, in a really effortless way, and I drown, and it annoys me. That's what happens. If I run, I'm gonna want to do like one of the really tough ones, like a 100-mile, maybe in I don't know, crazy elevation or loads of heat.
I'll throw something crazy at you that you might want to look at. It's called the Arch to Arc. And it goes from Marble Arch to the Arc de Triomphe in France. So you have to run from Marble Arch to the coast, then you swim the channel, and then you, I think, cycle to Paris.
No way.
Yeah. So it sounds like something you.
What's it called? Arch to
Arc.
Arch to Arc.
Yeah.
Now that's something. This is brilliant. Okay.
I'll send you a link to it, but just something to get a worm crawling in your head.
I'm glad this is in my earphones. My girlfriend can't hear this one yet.
Yeah, exactly. It would be my fault if you end up doing that.
That sounds fantastic.
And I just wondered as well, it might be too early yet, but are you feeling this extra resilience from this, the benefits from this in everyday life, in work, in relationship situations as yet, or is that too early to tell?
No, I think you do. I think it's like one of those things where I think everything starts first, like probably just chatting absolute rubbish here, but this is kind of how I see it. Is that I feel like everything starts anyway with your thought process, and how strong is that and how resilient is that? You don't really know. You can only test it,
Yeah.
which is what the running does. And I think for me, knocking some of those runs out, that just is like more proof that the thought process that you have in place does give you resilience. I'm not necessarily sure it's the run that gives you it. It's knowing that the thought process that you're working with and things you're telling yourself in those hard moments, it's almost getting them battle tested to know, yeah, that does work. That does work under stress. Whereas if I'd done the 100 miles and I crumbled and I go, no, I quit, that would be like, okay, that doesn't quite work. But do I think running helps build that resilience? Absolutely. I think regular running, consistent, like it just gives you that level of consistency of application that I think you need to become more resilient. I mean, everyone has those runs that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's what resilience is, right? It's being able to turn up on those runs you don't want to do. And that's what we have with my friend, is that, you know, he's turned up. I mean, he's got a really bad track record. I'll go out for a few times. I'd go out for a morning run. I'd catch him for the back end of my long run. And every time I see him, it would absolutely piss down with rain. We'd get caught in hail, but he would turn up every single time. And I think that's where those kind of things come in, is that you're always, so something on a long run, something's always going to go wrong. You're always going to, whether it's your thought process, whether you're dehydrated, whether you've got a little bit of a niggle, and it's still turning up, still executing, and doing that on a consistent basis, I think is basically as close as you can get for doing reps of resilience, let's say.
I think that's spot on. Just to finish off, Joe, because we're slightly running out of time now. I just wanted to kind of go back to the start again, and the fundraising that you did. Can you maybe just tell people, if they're listening to this, where they can go, if they can still sponsor you, add a little bit more to that total, and also as well, because I'm sure people will be interested too. How's your dad getting on now?
Yeah, so if you want, I'm sure I can send you the link for Just Giving, but I think it's Just Giving Joe-Thomas-NDW 100, which is the North Downs way.
Yeah, we'll stick it in the show notes.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I mean, we've raised, I guess, including gift aid, nearly up to £15,000 now, which is so meaningful for MDS UK. As I mentioned, it's a really rare form of blood cancer, so as you can imagine, the level of support and infrastructure it has versus other charities is quite limited. I think they only have 4 permanent staff. And what was amazing is, had 2 people from MDS UK came all the way out to Ashford to watch me finish on the 100 miler. And they rely a lot on volunteers. So this kind of money can really help transform the charity. Just as raising awareness can as well. So just coming out of that, of my run, one of my friends who lives in Australia has agreed to run for MDS UK for his marathon. So things like that are massive, and that's just amazing what he's doing. His name's Andrew Hall, and yeah, so donate to that would be amazing. And in terms of my dad, yeah, he's really good actually. I mean, right now, he has regular blood tests, and so far they have remained really stable. I mean, I'll just talk about some of and that's good. And as long as that, and that's fantastic. And he's had a really, to be honest, he's had a really great year since diagnosis. No one likes that. No one in the family wants to get that news. But I think for me, a big part of why I've done what I've done is also inspired by his reaction. Everyone gets bad news, right? And I think the biggest part is how you react to that, and not what you say, but what you do. And a part of what he's done was forced. I made him jump out of a plane the month after he got diagnosed. I think we both recognize now, with hindsight, that was slightly impulse based, but it was like a statement, right? It was like, yeah, we're going to do something that we've never done before. He retired instantly, like almost on the spot. I went and traveled the world with my mum, which is amazing. He started learning Spanish. Like, he's really, he goes out there all the time now. Me and him did a nice like motorbike trip around the mountains in Spain. He's been really active with MDS UK. So yeah, he's staying really active. It's like I think, I couldn't be more proud of the way that he's reacted to the diagnosis. Like, it's a real, he's an absolute rock for our family. I think the way that he's dealt with it and taken the fight to MDS as well has been pretty remarkable. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to be doing next year and what we're going to be doing together.
Oh, that's fantastic! I'm glad to hear that he's sort of tackling it all so well and making the most out of life, and that's fantastic. And again, well done on the run, Joe. Superb, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Running Tales podcast.
Thanks, Craig. It's an honor. Yeah, like I said, I don't get many requests like this working in an office, so it's probably first and last. But thanks so much.
If you swim that channel, I think there'll be another one.
All right, to be continued.
Thanks again to Joe Thomas for joining us on the Running Tales podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you want to back Joe in his efforts to raise money for MDS UK, then you can find the link to his fundraising page within our show notes. Please go and check that out, and if you can, please give generously. If you enjoyed this week's episode as much as I did, then please give us a rating or a review wherever you listen to the Running Tales podcast. I know I say this every week, but it makes a massive difference to the number of people who can find this podcast and listen to extraordinary stories like that of Joe. We can also be found on Substack, runningtales.substack.com, where our newsletter tells stories of people who've been on the podcast, as well as plenty of other news, hints and tips. So please check that out as well. Thanks again for joining us on this week's episode, and I look forward to seeing you again next week for another Running Tale.